You are listening to The Bridge Busters, the first dam busters and the race to save Britain, written by Mark Felton, published by Mandalay Books, and narrated by Mark Felton. Chapter 10. Sustained Effort. When Sergeant Johnson repeated that Pilot Officer Bowman was gone, Joe Collier thought that he was hearing things. "He's bought it?" Collier asked, fearing the worst. "No, sir. He's gone," Johnson repeated. "He's bailed out." Collier was stunned. Bowman had opened his escape hatch and jumped. He must have thought the plane was doomed and evacuated in a panic without waiting for the order. It would be a couple of years before Collier received word of what had become of Bowman. He'd landed heavily by parachute near the city of Kiel, in the process breaking his leg, and had been taken prisoner. A postcard from Bowman to Collier had concluded with the jaunty line, "Keep up the good work." Bomber Harris was very concerned. The failure to destroy M25 and M25A had been studied carefully by his own planning staff at 5 Group. They remained convinced that of all targets, these 2 aqueducts on the Dortmund-Ems Canal would cause the most disruption to the German invasion preparations if damaged or destroyed. But another school of thought suggested that betting everything on taking out these 2 targets was not wise. Perhaps it was better to spread the risk of failure by hitting other similar targets, thereby increasing the chances of disrupting German communications at the most vital time. 2 further aqueducts were hastily added to the target list. One was an old structure carrying the river Lippe across the canal 1.5 miles north-northeast of the junction of the Dortmund-Ems and Wesel-Datteln canals. The other was a new aqueduct over the Lippe about a mile northeast at the same canal junction. "The advantage of these 2 aqueducts are the canal banks in this sector, sir," Wing Commander Ackerman, an air intelligence officer sent to brief Harris on these new targets, explained. "The canal runs on high embankments above the surrounding country." Harris, wearing his reading spectacles, could see the potential at once. "It may be possible to attack these targets during the moonlight period of the current month," Ackerman added hopefully. Harris nodded his consent. "Send an urgent request to Southdown for PDU photographs of both of these structures," Harris ordered. Camera-equipped Spitfires would once again be sent to gather the hard evidence required for detailed operational planning. Ackerman sent in the PDU request as ordered, and he also spoke on the telephone to Wing Commander Trail at Bomber Command Headquarters on the 25th of July. They discussed the various targets in detail. They came to a conclusion that if both M25 and M25A could be destroyed, there would be no necessity to launch other operations against the Lippe aqueducts. M25 and M25A remained the key to shutting down the German movement of supplies and barges forward to the Channel, as all other German canals to the east fed their transport vessels and goods through these 2 western links in the inland waterway network. If destroyed, the loss of the 2 aqueducts would be a clean cut across Hitler's main transport artery. Bomber Harris decided to launch another all-out assault on M25 and M25A, using once again the Hemswell boys, before committing his forces to the other targets. Hemswell was chosen because the crews were familiar with the target, horribly familiar. Later, on the 25th of July, another mission briefing was held at RAF Hemswell. Again, this station would provide a large attack force that would drop some newly arrived M-bombs onto M25 and M25A, as well as conventional ordnance. Unlike the earlier nuisance raids, this show was to involve 24 aircraft from No. 61 and 144 squadrons, as well as a handful from 49 and 83 squadrons at Scampton. This represented about a quarter of 5 Group's aircraft strength. The Scampton crews detailed were sent along to Hemswell to join the briefing and discovered their part in the mission that night. Some of the 49 Squadron Hampdens had been fitted with balloon cutters on their wings. Their job during the raid was to fly along the sides of the canal and hopefully slice through the cables of any barrage balloons that the Germans had in place to try and forestall low-level bombing raids on the precious aqueducts. It was a pretty dicey proposition, for the 49 Squadron aircraft would have to fly low and level through the same storm of German flak as the aircraft dropping bombs. A flight from 83 Squadron would once again make a diversionary attack on the canal and a nearby German airfield in the hope of drawing off searchlights and flak so that the Hemswell boys could hopefully get their M-bombs on target in the aqueducts. That night there was an excellent moon condition over the target, the sky clear, the air warm, perfect attack conditions. 12 of the Hampdens involved in the raid went directly for the twin aqueducts, while the rest carried out their diversions. In the towns and villages near the aqueducts, air raid sirens cranked into life, their unnerving banshee wail soon overshadowed by the throb of approaching aircraft. Then the flak guns began to open up, the big guns' reports rattling windows and houses and farms, the blackout suddenly pierced by brilliant muzzle flashes as a multitude of shells were pumped into the skies by the overworked German gunners. As the heavens flashed and boomed with the explosions of shells, and colourful tracers arced skyward following the powerful beams of probing searchlights, piles of steaming brass shell cases soon lay in the mud all around the gun positions as officers shouted commands over the din. The flak was heavier than that experienced by the RAF during their last major raid, particularly from smaller 20mm auto cannons, as the Germans continued to beef up their defences against a constant stream of small-scale British nuisance attacks. The density of flying lead and shrapnel soon found their marks, with many aircraft damaged, but the Hampden demonstrated once again why it was so well liked by crews. A number were badly shot up, but still managed to struggle home. But one aircraft from 83 Squadron, flown by pilot officer William Tweddell, who had recently been awarded the DFC, was shot down, crashing in flames near the town of Wesel, killing 3 of the crew, including Tweddell. One man survived the crash and was taken prisoner. Once again, the attacking aircraft reported dropping their bombs on target, but none would have seen the detonations to confirm this, as the soluble plug fuses were set to explode 30 minutes after being released from the aircraft. It would be a frustrating few days of waiting before a reconnaissance aircraft could penetrate cloud cover that had built up over the aqueducts, obscuring them from view. "Good Lord!" Wing Commander Bennett cried out on viewing the latest PDU Spitfire photographs brought in to him by Squadron Leader Cole on the 29th of July. "Well, well, well," Bennett, picking up a large magnifying glass as he peered intently at one of the photographs, murmured. "Looks like a direct hit, sir," Cole said, standing beside Bennett. The Hemswell boys had finally made their mark on the aqueducts. Well, on at least one of them. M25A, the newer structure built by the Nazis in 1935, was missing a large chunk out of one of its concrete sides, blown down by one of the new M-bombs. "The canal appears to be dry, sir," Cole said, referring to the section of bypass canal that ran through M25A. "What about the section running over M25? Bennett asked, referring to the older Victorian aqueduct. If you look here, sir, you'll see that it's still operational, but the water appears to be at a very low level." Bennett stared at an enlargement showing both aqueducts from above. Very serious damage had finally been made to one of the vital aqueducts, necessitating extensive and time-consuming repairs. More importantly, for the time being, only the old aqueduct was open for business, restricting the numbers of barges that could pass along the canal. The initial euphoria, the first successful strike against an aqueduct, was to prove to be short-lived. Further reconnaissance flights over the following days showed the remarkable German capacity for recovery in full swing. The damaged area of M25A was cordoned off with a temporary waterproof wall, while engineers began to repair the original structure. Within days of the bomb's strike, the aqueduct's watertight doors were opened and the structure once more filled with water. With the temporary wall in place and reconstruction underway, the width of the aqueduct channel was reduced by 50%, but barges were soon squeezing through and continuing on their journeys to the invasion assembly ports on the Channel coast. Throughout the rest of July, invasion alerts were sent out to Bomber Command, warning of a continuing mass build-up of barges moving along the Dortmund-Ems Canal and gathering in Antwerp, Boulogne, Calais, Dunkirk, Le Havre, Ostend and Rotterdam. The figures were indeed alarming, and constant overflights by PDU Spitfires presented a depressing picture. Hitler seemed to be entering the last phase of his build-up, preparatory to crossing the Channel in force. The British had also been studying the weather and tides with great trepidation. Experts gave 4 possible periods when a German invasion attempt could be made: the 5th to the 9th of August, the 2nd to the 7th of September, the 1st to the 6th of October, and the 30th of October to the 4th of November. But weather prediction was not an exact science, and these dates were only educated guesswork. Extensive defences had been hastily prepared along the south and east coasts. A coastal crust of mined and wired beaches, equipped with pillboxes, gun emplacements and searchlights, was ready to absorb the initial German assault, manned by weak coastal defence divisions and Home Guard units, as the local defence volunteers had been renamed. But the British lacked the strength to throw the Germans back into the sea. They would achieve beachheads. So in order to prevent a rapid advance on London, a series of stop lines had been constructed, consisting of more bunkers, pillboxes, strong points and fortified villages, as well as a small mobile armoured reserve, to hopefully defeat any German breakout from their bridgehead. But nothing was completely finished. The troops were either the shattered remnants of the British Expeditionary Force that had been withdrawn through Dunkirk, or hastily called up replacements, supplemented by the keen but woefully underarmed Home Guard. Britain was short of trained manpower, weapons, tanks and artillery guns. Pretty much everything except a resolve to, in the words of her bellicose Prime Minister, fight them on the beaches. Fighter Command was gearing up for a titanic struggle for air supremacy over the southeastern counties, while Portal at Bomber Command was under increasing pressure to strike hard the enemy's preparations and lines of communications. It all came down to results, and Bomber Command wasn't delivering. Mein Führer, barge conversions will take until the 15th of September, the first day when weather conditions will be completely favourable for a landing assault, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder announced to Hitler at another conference held at Hitler's mountaintop hideaway, the Berghof, on the 31st of July. The only topic on the agenda was Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of England. This leaves only the period 22nd to the 26th of September as the next possible invasion dates for 1940, Raeder continued stiffly, when the weather in the Channel will be suitable. German meteorologists had deduced slightly different good weather dates from their British adversaries, as the two sides collected information from different sources. Hitler nodded slowly from across the large map table, his arms folded in contemplation. The landings will have to be made on a narrow front, Field Marshal von Brauchitsch said, representing the army at the conference. Mein Führer, in my opinion, it would be better to launch Sea Lion in spring 1941. Hitler's eyes shot up to meet von Brauchitsch's, and the Field Marshal found his gaze icy and disconcerting. No, Hitler snapped. Every month that passes, the British army increases in strength. I want the invasion mounted in mid-September. Turning to General Halder of the Army Staff, Hitler smiled grimly. I will order the Luftwaffe to begin its operations to destroy the English Air Force around the 5th of August. Hitler now addressed all of the senior officers gathered around the table in the Berghoff's great room. 8 to 14 days after that, I shall decide on when to launch the landing operations. The following day, 1st of August, Hitler issued Führer Directive No. 17. It ordered intensive air attacks against England. From the 5th of August, weather conditions permitting, the Luftwaffe was to overpower the Spitfire and Hurricane squadrons of Sir Hugh Dowding's Fighter Command in the shortest possible time. Attacks were then to be made on ports and food stocks, while leaving alone ports to be used in the invasion. The British fighters would be driven from the skies over southeastern England, opening the way for the invasion fleet to set sail across the Channel to land the troops. Hitler also set a tentative date for Sea Lion, irrespective of Grand Admiral Raeder's complaints about the time it was taking to assemble and convert barges into landing craft. That date was the 15th of September 1940. I think I've got the answer to this night bombing racket, Squadron Leader Oscar Bridgman said in a leisurely drawl. Bridgman, Guy Gibson and Ellis Ross were sitting on deck chairs on the lawn in front of their quarters on the 2nd of August, chatting and smoking pipes. It was a glorious summer's day, and the exhausted pilots were shooting the breeze in the slightly cocky and assured manner of professionals at the top of their game. Operations were constant, as they bombed Germany and France on an unremitting schedule of nuisance raids, or went barge-busting to Antwerp and the other Channel ports. As long as you keep alert the whole time, and keep as far as possible out of defended areas, except over the target, there is no reason why you should not do 100 trips. What do you think, Rossi? Ross was slouched down in an armchair, his eyes closed as the sun beat on his face. I like the high-level attacks, he replied, sitting up and opening his eyes. Or else it must be the very low-level prang. But the main thing, without a doubt, is to keep right on the track. I agree, Gibson interjected, removing his pipe from his mouth. But of course, it takes a lot to beat a dive-bombing attack for sheer safety. Gibson had perfected this style of attack. The only snag is that you have to rely on the rear gunner to find out where the bombs went. That's okay, Ross replied mischievously. They will always shoot a pretty good line for you. The other two laughed. But seriously, if you are really in the know about this, there's fuck all danger to the whole thing, Ross boasted. Well, Bridgman said, there's always the chance of a lucky shot. Ross guffawed dismissively. Yes, he replied, but it'll have to be pretty lucky to hit me. Ross replaced his pipe in his mouth and struck a match. At that moment a massive explosion went off from the direction of the base, a booming detonation, the loudest any of them had ever heard. Startled, all three pilots jumped to their feet and stared towards the base, where a mushroom cloud of black smoke was beginning to climb into the clear blue sky. Christ! Bridgman exclaimed. What on earth was that? That wasn't an aircraft, Ross said, shading his eyes with one hand as he stared at the rising cloud. Come on, Gibson said, grabbing his cap. Let's see. When Gibson and his friends ran through the main gate at Scampton, all hell had broken loose. The column of dense black smoke had by now climbed to over 3,000 feet. Men and women in uniform were milling about or emerging from air raid shelters, tin hats on their heads. Windows were broken all over the base. Clods of earth and bits of brick and concrete had showered down like shrapnel and lay on the roads and on roofs. After a while, a waff from the operations room told Gibson's group what had happened. 18 mines had blown up in the bomb dump. The force of the explosion had been tremendous, ripping the bunker completely apart. The mines, ready for further operations against the canal aqueducts, would need to be replaced, and fast. The last thing Bomber Command needed were own goals like this, with the Germans breathing hard down their necks. You have been listening to The Bridge Busters, The First Dam Busters and The Race to Save Britain, written by Mark Felton, published by Mandalay Books, and narrated by Mark Felton. For short films on a wide variety of military history subjects, visit my other YouTube channel, Mark Felton Productions. You can also help support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon, details in the description box below.